Oh, right, okay. I guess this is live. I've never done this before, so I'm hoping that somebody can send a message and tell me if it is actually live. Um, so I'm in the group for Caroline Strawson, and my name is Lorraine Marshall, and today I said I would do a talk on um, money struggles. And so I made some notes because obviously I wanted to get things right. So I have got a lot of notes that I've made here. So basically I had a background in money advice when I worked with the Citizens Advice Bureau when I was living in Sunderland, which was a long time ago. And now I have been living in Spain for 7 years. Basically the money advice that I'm going to talk about today is what I was trained in when I was working with the Citizens Advice Bureau. So I just want to put a disclaimer out that I'm not a financial advisor. I don't do this for a living either. And basically, if you have got complex issues, then you really need to seek professional help if you've got really complex financial issues. So what I am going to explain is the method that I trained in while working as an advisor. So today, this is my talk on struggling to make ends meet. And I actually created an acronym which I use, which is called PIES, P-I-E-S. And I'm going to walk through what that means because it's something that I created a long time back when I was helping people to basically get out of debt and people who were struggling with their finances. Because I used to do welfare rights, tribunals, and make sure that people were on the right benefits, and then if they had lots of debts, to help them to reduce or actually write debts off as well. So what I want to do is get started with this method. So number 1, P, is prioritise. So basically what you're looking at here in prioritise is you need to list down all of your expenses that are what is considered priority. So rent, mortgage, council tax, utilities, all of the things you need in order to be able to keep a roof over your head, keep your utilities on, and you need to identify all of these priority expenses and put them down in a list. Now, when you list out the expenses, you can either do that on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, and I guess that would depend on how you actually are paid. If you're paid weekly, then you might want to budget weekly. If you're paid monthly, then you might want to budget monthly. So that's the first thing to do with P. Prioritise your expenses of what you need. Some people, for example, might need to prioritise a car and vehicle insurance, and it might be their only mode of transport to go to work or drop kids off at school. So that could be a priority. For other people, a car might be a luxury, might not be a priority. So you need to list all of those expenses. While you're doing that task, you might identify some expenses that you can actually stop. Some monthly expenses that will start to reduce your outgoings, things that you've forgotten about or you've subscribed to, that you can stop paying for. you might even think, oh, well, Netflix is not a priority. If you're struggling, then you could do without Netflix or Sky subscription or lots of different other things, yeah? So that is what you can do first. So the second letter is I, and that stands for income. It's really hot here in Spain today, and I think you've probably got a heat wave over in the UK for all those people who might be listening in. Because we've had the weather warning here in Spain telling us that the government decided to declare some sort of emergency because of the hot weather. But we sort of experience this nearly every year. Anyway, get back to the letter, which is I, income. So what you need to do is list all of your income, and that could come from lots of different sources. For example, you could be entitled to benefits, and so you need to list the benefits, child benefits. You might be entitled to some sort of payment from an ex-partner. So everything that you have in income, any sources of income needs to be listed, whether weekly or monthly. Then what you need to look at is how you might increase that income. There's lots of different things you can think about, and what I used to say to people is that if you actually are you actually entitled to any welfare benefits that you're not claiming? So that's one thing that you need to check, that you're not on a low income and you haven't claimed anything that will help you to top up your income. So that's one thing that you need to think about. And the other one is if you're in a job and you're working as a PAYE, pay as you earn taxpayer, you need to ensure that you are actually on the right tax code and that you're not being overtaxed, because that's a way of helping you out. Are you due any tax refund, for example, is another thing that you could check out and find out whether or not there's any payment that you could be due back. Another way of increasing your income would be to think about an income earning opportunity, something that you can get started in relatively easy, that is not going to cost you a lot of money to get started, and basically you can get word of mouth referrals through friends and family and things like that, which is a great way. If you're a little bit entrepreneurial, which I've been all my life, it's a great way to try and increase some of your income. The other one is, have you got a spare room in the property? Because if you have a spare room and you can rent that room out, then you can have a tax-free income from renting a room in the property, and that would give you an extra source of income to help you out through money struggles. For example, you could rent to a student if you're in a university city, or you might want to rent to a professional if your property is near to a hospital or a big call centre or something like that, which would give you some form of income. In a very simple way of doing it, and as I said, there's a certain amount of that income is tax-free as well. You could also consider raking through all of your items that you haven't used for a long time and then doing a sale. Basically, you can put things on Facebook, sell things really quickly, and then recover yourself a little bit more income to help you moving forward. So anything that you haven't used for a long time, even clothes or old toys that children don't use anymore. I'm sure people have got lots of items that are just stored in the cupboards or in the loft or wherever that could be turned into cash. So that's just another one of the ways to increase in your income. There's probably more that anyone can think of, and if you can't think of any more, then it might be a good idea to drop them in the comments so other people can see them and take note. So that's the income, trying to increase the level of income that you have. Now we move on to E. E is the expenses that are non-priority. That means all the expenses that you don't have to pay because obviously they're not priority expenses. It could be credit cards that you might be struggling with at the moment. It could be loans. It could be, like I said, Netflix subscriptions to things that you don't need to actually have running on a monthly basis. Of course, you need to make sure that you've got your food and all the other things as priorities. But with these expenses, when you list them all down, right, if you then find out and discover that, hopefully, all of the income that you've got coming in on a weekly or a monthly basis is covering all of the expenses that you have now, that is a great place to be, because obviously you're not in a struggle. You're not as bad as you think you were, because your actual income is covering your priority and all your non-priority expenses. So obviously you've looked at the increasing of the income, or even if you want, looking at diversifying what you do or changing your job. There's all of these things. Now obviously if you find out that when you've listed your income and you've listed all your expenses, your income doesn't cover everything, this isn't a good place, because obviously you're racking up debt every week, every month. You're racking up debt because your income is too low and it's not covering all of your expenses. In this scenario, what you'd be thinking of is how you might have to scale down on your outgoings, your expenses. Might you need to look at a cheaper place to live even. If you can't increase your income, you've got to think of all the possibilities. You've got to have basically head out of the sand and thinking about what your future is. Do you look for a higher paid job? Do you take on some other type of work? Do you do something different? You can't keep going if you have expenses that are more than your income. So we've covered looking at the priority expenses. We've looked at how you might increase your income and listen all the income down, and now we've looked at all of the non-priority expenses. So then, let's have a look. Say if you have an amount of money that is available, that we call available income. Say you've got a lot of debts and you can't manage all of the debts, but you have got a little bit of income left over when you've checked all your priority debts, all your priority expenses. Now we call that available income, which is something that you've got left at the end of the week. That could be something like, I know, £100, could be £50. So if when you've done your income minus the priority expenses minus the expenses, you have got some money left over, that's your available income. So the last step in this method is S. Now what S means is the share of available income. And how this works is, if you have 2 or 3 credit cards, for example, maybe a loan or something like that, which aren't priority, it's not a mortgage, it's not a car loan, hire purchase, then any of these other types of debts are non-priority. And you can then look at how you can share the available income, the leftover income, with your non-priority creditors, credit cards, loans. So what I always say is, don't worry about the situation, because being in debt is something that everybody gets into at some stage through their careers. Anything can happen. You can be ill for a long time, and if you're not earning and your sick pay's run out and you end up on a benefit of sickness, very soon you find out that the credit card's racked up just to keep ahead of yourself, paying down priority payments, buying food, clothes, whatever. So a lot of people do rack up significant amount of debt and credit card debt. But you don't need to panic. There is a simple formula basically for sharing out the income that you have left over when you've worked out what that is. Basically, you take the amount of available income as the first amount, you divide that by the total of outstanding credit debt, which then gives you a figure which is usually something like 0.54 or 12 or whatever it is, depending on how much money. That is the per pound pro rata amount that you can actually share with any creditors. And that is the basic formula. Available income divided by the total debt outstanding, which equals X, which is the per pound pro rata amount of money that you have available to send to your creditors. Now obviously what you've done is listed out all of these non-priority creditors, all your credit cards or loans that you can't afford to pay because your income isn't high enough. So for example, somebody who has got a good income and they've got, say, a £300 available income at the end of the month, and they have outstanding debts of, say, 12,500. When they do that calculation, available income divided by total outstanding, 12,500, the per pound pro rata payment is 0.024, which is obviously a small amount. But one of their debts is 10,000, so 10,000 of 0.24 is £240. And so if the payment for that debt is more than £240, you obviously haven't got enough money to pay the full amount. So what you would need to do is write letters to all of the creditors and basically then offer a lower amount paid on a pro rata basis. And in the case of a 10,000 loan, on this pro rata payment where you've got 300, you'd be telling the creditor, I have got £240 per month and I would like to pay this to this amount, this loan, okay? Now they have other debts, and so they have a 1,800 payment to somewhere else, and they do the pro rata calculation. What is 0.24, 0.24 times 1,800? That's £44 per month. So that particular creditor would get £44 per month in any letter that you actually send out or any phone call that you make with that creditor. A third debt or creditor has an outstanding of 500. You do the same calculation. Now that particular creditor would end up with a £12 payment per month, and the final debt that they have is a 200 loan, say, and that would be paid off at £4 per month. And obviously a disclaimer is, if you have a really good credit score at the moment. When you start to write these types of letters to creditors to say, look, I'm struggling and don't have enough income at the moment, something's gone wrong, this has happened, and I need to restructure, then the creditor will mark your credit records to say that obviously you're paying a reduced payment. And it's not really the end of the world at this point. It just means that your record won't be perfect. So this is basically the simplest way to deal with the non-priority creditors, because what you need to be looking at is just to write a standard letter and then to put your list of your income, put your list of your expenditures, show what money you have available, then list all the creditors that you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever they are, with the outstanding balance, and then how much for each creditor you prepared to make an offer. And then that letter gets sent to every creditor so they can see your situation. And they can then accept or reject the offer you've made. But I would say 9 times out of 10, if you've took your head out of the sand and you've done your homework and you've got everything in order and you've shown the creditors that you're willing to make payments, then 9 times out of 10 they'll say, oh yes, okay, and they'll start accepting whatever offer it is that you can make. And you can explain that it's a temporary situation, things might improve within a certain time frame, and then they can revisit the situation 3 months, 6 months, whatever. So that's the simplest way to do it. Now obviously with credit cards, you can actually request with credit cards, because it's a revolving credit and interest gets added all of the time. And then you can actually ask them to freeze the rate and to freeze the interest, because if you pay in a lesser amount and every time they add interest, the debt's just going to rack up. So in communications with credit cards, it's a good idea to request freezing of the interest. And again, if you're confident enough and you can write those types of letters, which you can find all over the internet, you just need to Google and you'll find them where you can copy or download. It'll probably be on CAB website as well. Then you can ask for the credit card interest to be frozen, so that any payment that you do make is chipping off the value of the debt. So basically, if you are confident and you can call your creditors, right, make a list of the creditors, do all of your homework. They might ask you to email details of your income expenditure, but if you can do that, you can make phone calls. But what I would say is always have a notepad and a pen and keep a record of when you've called, the date you've called, even ask who you've spoken to, so that you've got a record. I rang this company on this date and I spoke with, and it was agreed, whatever's agreed, that you pay this payment, nominal payment, or that you're making a different payment to the agreed payment. So you've always got a record of what you are doing. Something else that sometimes happens, because I know that we're in a group, a private group, which includes people like myself who've been in relationships with guys who might have used manipulation tactics and coerced into signing agreements that you didn't really want to sign, and end up with debts in your name because they didn't have a good credit record. And that can happen. I've done it myself, I've been there, got the t-shirt. But now the law is changing, and for me it was a long time ago. There was no such laws then, and so I had to figure a way out for myself. which I did. It took a long time, 7 years to repair a credit record. But I did it. I actually bought a house back in Sunderland a long time ago, so I did repair the credit record. But coerced debt. Now, if an ex-partner or a spouse, boyfriend, has actually gotten you into financial difficulties, you've signed for things you didn't really want to sign for, then this is called economic abuse. It's a domestic abuse, and more banks and credit card companies are becoming informed about this. The organisation that you might have heard of is called C, which stands for Surviving Economic Abuse. And you'll find them probably on Facebook and on Twitter, and if you Google Surviving Economic Abuse, they probably come up there as well. And what that organisation is doing is raising awareness within the financial organisations and within government, and basically help to change the legislation so that financial abuse and economic abuse is actually starting to be recognised now, and that women who get into this situation with abusive partners can actually get some remedies. They don't work one-to-one with victims or survivors, but you can get the information from the internet and get help from various organisations. And when you're calling in to banks, credit cards or loan companies, if you actually say to them what the situation is, then quite often they have a specialist advisor who can help. And I think what they called is the vulnerable customer support. So if you can call in, or if you write in and you're in that situation, write that, have you got a vulnerable customer support? Because if they have, then they know what you mean by that, and you'll be able to get more assistance, more support with what you want them to tell them. And with your permission, they'll keep any of your communication on file. So if you need to call back or you need to get back in touch, you don't have to start at the beginning, and you don't have to explain everything that's happened and go over all the traumatic events that you've been through, because I know what it's like and it can be traumatic. So basically then, another helpful support which I would signpost you to would be the Citizens Advice Bureau, which is the organisation that I worked for a long time ago. And if you Google that, you'll probably find CAB websites where they've got debt and money sample letters that you can send to creditors. And I do have a link in my notes. I don't know whether or not I'll be able to drop it into the comments later, but I could try. So basically what my advice is to tackle your financial struggles and yourself. It's not difficult unless you've got a real complex situation. But if it's straightforward, tackle it yourself. I would advise against going with any organisation that offers you help but takes a fee. A percentage of your payment goes to them for administrative purposes. And for me, I don't think that's right. If you can actually do it yourself, then all of the money that you have as available income is going towards the debt. So dealing with the creditors, it's not difficult once that you know that where you are with your finances, where you are with your income, where you are with all your expenses. You've identified your priorities, you've got those covered, so you're not in any danger of losing your house, getting your utilities cut off. That's a good place to be. Then you just need to work out how you're going to manage the other expenses, which like I've been through with all of the explanation about increasing your income, reducing your expenses, and then creating a budget based on what I've just explained with this method. And basically that's it for my particular talk here. The only thing I might have missed out is when we're talking about coerced debt and debt that you've racked up because of another person, you may be able to request a write-off. So if you've signed for something but you didn't really want that, and you can prove that it wasn't for you because you will never ride a motorbike, right? Because you don't know how to ride a motorbike, but you bought one anyway because it wasn't for you, it was for him. Then you might be able to request a write-off of the debt. Now I know women, I've actually heard stories that guy wanted a boat and she actually signed for one, and that caused massive problems for her in the future because there wasn't any economic abuse when she did that. So that is my talk on money struggles. Hope it's been useful for everyone, and I'm not sure if I can drop any of notes in with the comments later when the replay's up. I'll ask about that with the other admins, and just hope it's been useful for everyone. I'm not very good at reading the comments and talking to people because this is the first ever time I've done a live on Facebook, and so I was a little bit nervous, but hopefully you've understood. And it's so hot here, it's unbelievable. Anyway, it's just after 6:34 here, and so what I'll do is I'll sign out and say goodbye, and hope you've enjoyed this talk. Any questions, maybe drop them in the comments and I can see if I can give you some answers. Okay, bye everyone.